Ladies and gentlemen, was that a good meal or what? Even though Eddie Bailey has passed away, his daughter and the crew here have kept up his high standard. And so once again, thank you to the Baileys and to the folks here at the Old Breton Inn. By the by, over at that table over there, you'll find these books. Remember who designed the cover. The inside's pretty good, too. In any event, I am very happy and very pleased that this evening we have two fine gentlemen with us, and I am pleased to introduce David and Joseph Norris.
Thank you kindly. You got one of us. I'm not sure where the other one went, but he's a coming. We've been introduced. You all remember that sound? That was the sound I grew up with, was the old whippoorwill hollering in the woods. Don't hear them too much anymore. They're vanishing. Too many DDTs, too many foxes. Nobody traps anymore, you know. And they're ground nesting birds, so they're just easy prey for a fox. And I think the last one I heard was a couple years ago at the end of Clark Mill Road. They had one that would show up at sunset, but it was a pleasure to hear him. This here's a song about how everything has changed in this county since we all were born and raised in it, called Time and Its Changes. Old fields that wane in light, field road winds on out of sight. Just another somber night, passing from the day. In the distance an old house waits, time has stolen its yards and gates. All its people, they've disappeared into the rambling years. Time and its changes, I feel them all on the land when the shadows fall. The whippoorwill that used to call, where I lay my head. All the old folks I used to know, they must pass and I must let them go. That's the way life is, you know. Just time and its changes. Time and its changes, I feel them all on the land when the shadows fall. The whippoorwill used to call, where I lay my head. Maybe someday it might not seem so much like a morning dream. Lives will change, so will seems. Some things never do. Time and its changes, I feel them all the land when the shadows fall, the whippoorwill it used to call, where I lay my head. Well, thank you. We appreciate it.
Thank you very kindly. Welcome in, everyone. We're St. Mary's County, born and raised, both of us. Mama's family, I think, goes all the way back. And Daddy's family got here, according to Mr. Edwin Beitzel, who helped found this St. Mary's County Historical Society. The Norris family moved here from Virginia in 1750. So we're the local yokels. Time we were kids, actually, David was the one that took me over behind my father's house in Chaptico, and we went walking in the fields in the springtime when the rain had fallen and the fields had been plowed and haired, and you started finding, we used to call them Indian arrowheads, you know, and it wasn't until I started going to college at St. Mary's College, and I would haunt the library in between classes and devour everything I could learn about the contact period of Native Americans, that I found that these arrowheads were actually spear points and were thousands and thousands of years old. I have David found one in Oscar Schuhart's field in Chaptico that looked like the bottom of an ace of spades.
It was perfect.
It's perfect. We only
That's
found
the part that was sticking up to, the rest of it was missing.
and the rest of it was gone. I can't tell you how many times I went back to that field to try to find the other half of that spear point. But I found one in that field that is a Kirk Palmer notched spear point, which Silas would know, dates to 8200 BC. I'm not real good at that ciphering stuff, but I think that's 10,000 years old. And they have been found in Smith Creek as old as 11,000 BC.
When we grew up in Chaptico in the fields, because it was a colonial port town, we would find colonial artifacts and Indian artifacts side by side in the same field.
So I wrote this song in 1984 when they did the 350th anniversary of Maryland's history, and it's called Indian Fields. In the Indian field, who once ran a child through the wild, silent and still. In the Indian field, with eyes like the raven, a man stood, whispering words. Indian field, prayers to the earth and the sky. In the Indian field, where the warm winds of summer blew timeless, silent and still. In the Indian field, the winter brought snow and the fires burned gentle and warm. In the Indian field, the smoke rises up to the sky. Lies the hunter, the gatherer of old, here in the moon's mystic light, free from the the shackles of time, free from the world rushing by. In the Indian field, once ran a child through the wildwood, silent and still. In the Indian field, where love once rushed in like a wild bird, drinking its fill. In the Indian field, the moon rises up to the sky.
Alrighty. The tales of the watermen are many. And, we take for granted, I don't think, a little less these days. Back at the, I've heard tales at the turn of the century, they could find, ladies, please. They'd find 55-gallon drums full of hard crabs, if you can imagine. They couldn't give them away. They had so many of them. They were catching them in mass.
My uncle lived down Medley's Neck. He used to sell a quart of oysters for 25 cents. Back in the day.
Yeah, I know.
Tom Wisner told a great story of this old waterman down in Solomon's, where the Solomon's Pier is. It used to be a movie theater. And there was this one old waterman, and he was real sweet on this girl. But he was so shy, he couldn't say one word to her. Sound familiar? And one day he saw her stand in line at the movie theater with some other guy. And the fella never said one word. He just walked up to him and bow, cold cocked him, took her hand, and he said they've been married 55 years.
He wasn't going to stand for that. Well, this is called the Waterman's Prayer. It starts before the daybreak as a clatter at the dock, the ringing of the morning bell and pulling on socks. Familiar shapes are standing in the morning dark and dim. They're casting off and underway, and another day begins. They talk about their families, and they'll tell a yarn or two. Sometimes a little melody they hum to get them through. It's another day of working, and they're pulling up traps. They empty them into the hold and throw them back. In the heat of summer morning, in the warm blue air, they're praying for tomorrow, the waterman's prayer. Well, they know the times are changing. Are they partly to blame? No matter what, it's plain to see the fact remains. They're counting up the harvest with every bushel gain, but the days of yesteryear will never be the same. In the heat of summer morning, in the warm blue air, they're praying for tomorrow, the waterman's prayer. The oyster like you used to, but you don't know what to do when the end of your livelihood is staring back at you. You rise up in the morning to the ringing of the bell, but the living you made yesterday ain't there to sell. In the chilly winter morning, there's snow in the air. You're praying for tomorrow, the waterman's prayer. Thank you very much. We appreciate that. So around the turn of the century, we're talking about the last century, 1900, the world had gone crazy for oysters. It was sending them by the steamer load over to Europe, and it led to a lot of unscrupulous practices on the water by some lower Virginia eastern shore. I might add that Virginians are into it. They would.
My brother down on the Virginians, in case you hadn't noticed.
Tom Wisner said they'd find guys with the throats slit hanging from the yard arm down there. It was a rough bunch. Well, they'd go up to Baltimore and catch some young boy coming out of the bar all liquored up, and they'd bop him on the head, and he'd wake up on a dredge boat. As my old friend Jim Weller worked for Francis Goddard down on Piney Point, he said his favorite scene was, "Get that goddamn JoJo board." They have two dredges on the boat, one on each side, and if one didn't go over at the same time as the other one, it would jerk the boat out. But they'd catch some boy coming out of the bar and work him all year long on a dredge boat and promise to play him at the end of the year, at the end of the season. And the end of the season would come, and they'd swing the boom around, bop him on the head, and knock him overboard and kill him. It was called the boom payoff. It was
Being paid by the boom. It's also where the expression lowering the boom comes from.
So they used to sing this song out of Baltimore called, "I lay me in the forepeak with me feet towards Baltimore. I'll ne'er again be shanghaied on the lower eastern shore, where it's salt fish for breakfast, cornbread twice a day. You're a lucky dredger if you never get your pay."
That's true.
What they'd say Tom said the reason they said sleep with my feet towards Baltimore is if you didn't keep your feet towards the front of the boat, if the captain ran into a sandbar or something late at night, he'd break your neck, if you had your head up that end.
So this song is a true story, and part of it's about being paid off by the boom. The other part is about my grandfather, whose name was King Henry Hill. He lived in Chaptico, was raised up on Trent Hall Farm up in Mechanicsville, grew up on the Patuxent River. And Mama said he used to walk out in the morning, stick his hand up in the air, and he could tell by the direction that the wind was blowing what the weather was going to be for the rest of the day. And she said he could go in Chaptico Bay and get his oysters down at Mill Point and bring them up to Darby's Landing there in Chaptico, sit them on the pier, and walk the 2 miles it took to get home, get his horse and buggy and carriage, and go back out, and the oysters would still be sitting there, and nobody would bother him. I don't know if that's true today or not. Well, this is the life I live, and the river's in my blood. I work the rolling waters for oysters and mud, and I work on them all year long. Yes, this is the life I love. I work the rolling waters for oysters and mud. My granddaddy was the one, and the land, it was his kin. He could forecast the weather by the way the wind blew in. And he knew the northern storm, and he knew the southern gale. He died with the full moon in his eyes and a full wind in his sail. But this is the life I live, and the river's in my blood. I work the rolling waters for oysters and mud, and I work on them all year long. Yes, this is the life I love. I work the rolling waters for oysters and mud. Well, his name was Willie McGee, from down on the eastern shore. He was shanghaied on a dim-lit night on the streets of Baltimore. And they took him out to the bay, and they worked him all year long. And they paid him off by the boom, by God, on the chilly Chesapeake morn. But this is the life I live, and the river's in my blood. I work the rolling waters for oysters and mud, and I work on them all year long. This is the life I love. I work the rolling waters for oysters and mud. I work the rolling waters for oysters and mud.
Now, this next song is about moonshine, and we don't know nothing about moonshine. But I guarantee you there's a whole bunch of stories.
When we were little kids, we saw this fire in the woods. It was the light would come on, the light would go off. And we told Daddy, there's a light over there in the woods. And he said, that's the boogeyman. Said, you go out there and the boogeyman will get you. It was many years later before I realized the boogeyman was the moonshiner. And Daddy was buying his product.
Mama told me this story about how the revenuers would come down from D.C. and Chaptico, and they'd find a moonshine still, and they'd dump it all out into the Chaptico run. Next morning, all the cows were drunk. She said there was a bull that didn't move for 3 days. So I had to write a song about that. Only I changed the bull to a horse. It's called The Horse in the Road. Well, Billy, he came by me. I was walking down the road. He had a wagon full of children. 6 or 7, quite a load. He seemed a little troubled. As by me there he rode, and he pulled back on the reins, and children bobbled as he slowed. He says, you going that way, mister? You might listen here to me. Look out for a big horse, done gone crazy as can be. He ain't even acting normal, not even 1 degree, and the children all were pointing and talking to me. There's a horse in the road. There's a horse in the road. Well, I turned and looked, and sure enough, it surely was a horse. A big one, too, as mean as sin and mad as heck, of course. He reared up on his back legs, then he tumbled in a heap. He couldn't get back up, as though his legs had gone to sleep. I snuck up right beside him. He never much as flinched. He had no explanation why he had no better sense, especially the part where he had gotten out the fence. And now he was enchanted and really in a pinch. The horse in the road. There's a horse in the road. Oh yeah, he ain't going nowhere, oh no. I just broke out in a big old grin, just as Billy and his horde came sliding up beside me. I said, Lordy, Lordy, Lord, I think I see the problem. This here horse is drunk. The reason he can't move is because he's drunker than a skunk. Turned out the revenuers had found somebody still, and they poured a hooch out in the creek, and the critters drank their fill. Next morning, 20 drunken cows come stumbling through the town, and it was 2 days later before that big horse came around. There's a horse in the road. There's a horse in the road. Oh yeah, he ain't a-going nowhere, oh no. If he do, he'll be going real slow. Oh yeah. I think some of the fellas in this room might remember mornings like that. What's we got here? Oh, yeah.
It used to not be such a hard time to go down there. These days, it's getting up that's the hard part. This is a song about Solomon's Island. Not as it was, but as it is. Oh, wait a minute. I did that. Changed that, didn't I?
You tell me.
I think it's on 4. I saw this old fella out in the river there, in Patuxent River, with his dog in the boat one morning. It's easy to write a song about that. Got a ball cap on his head that says Baltimore. Brown juicy stain on his chin. Morning sun rising in the Labrador's eye. On that summit she's been pondering. Oh, man in the river, taking that ride out on the rolling green water. Oh, man in the river, taking that ride out on the rolling green water. Happened to when he was a child, running barefoot in the sand? Whatever happened to those memories lost? And why was his way of life the cause? Oh, man in the river, taking that ride out on the rolling green water. Oh, man in the river, taking that ride out on the rolling green water. But it's the days when the rockfish would spawn, splashing in the once clear headwater. Oysters that were bigger than the palm of his hand. Hardcrab was his living in summer. Oh, man in the river, taking that ride out on the rolling green water. condos now stand where the shucking house stood. The waters of his youth are all clouded. He thinks it's time that he headed back in and left all those yesterdays wandering. Oh, man in the river, taking that ride out on the rolling green water. Oh, man in the river, taking that ride out on the rolling green water. Got a ball cap on his head that says Baltimore.
What's that? I want to believe. You think? Yeah. You want to do Rivertown? Yeah. Okay. Well, last year was a lot like this year was in Florida. We had water rolling everywhere. Every time you turned around, was another storm coming up the coast, and we got hammered. I remember coming down Route 5, and there was a dumpster floating down the middle of the road, and there wasn't nothing nobody could do about it. Chaptico and down here in Compton, right up the road here, and Great Mills always floods when it rains. I think they may have fixed that now. I'm not sure. They did a little bit of construction down there, but goodness gracious, the rain, the water. So I actually wrote this song after Katrina, but sure fits. Dark in the south, heavy wind a-comin', won't be long. Nighttime we'll be running out the bad and mournful news. Mama's got the high water blues. Hurricane slapping up the alley, all my friends shoved into the galley. Now the dream is broken in two. Papa's got the high water blues. In a year or two, maybe things will be all right. But until then, I just got you. I'm holding on with all of my might. It's dark in the south, heavy wind a-comin', won't be long. Nighttime we'll be drumming out the bad and mournful news. Mama's got the high water blues. Papa's got the high water blues. Thank you. My mom used to tell me these stories about the house parties they used to have over in Chaptico when she was a girl, and that was back in the 20s and 30s. And my grandfather played the fiddle wildly, I understand. And then his first cousin, Brian Knott's father, was also a fiddler, and they would take turns. They'd go to the Bachelor's Hope down on Maddox Road, Manor Road. They'd have a lot of parties there, and Granddaddy would play the fiddle till he got wore out, and then Brian Knott's dad would take over, and he'd play till he got wore out, and then Granddaddy would take back over, and while one was fiddling, the other one was drinking. And Mama said the damnedest thing, the folks would give their kids a little spoon of codeine cough syrup and knock them out for the night so they could party. Like,
Mama
damn.
told this story too about being at Bachelor's Hope with, it was Model A, wasn't it? Uncle Leo's.
Well, yeah, Uncle Leo wanted to
Model
go
A.
to this party, and he
He didn't have a date, so he asked Mama to go. Mama got all dressed up, and they went to the party. And then he come back, and it had rained so hard that the bridge had washed out.
It was worse than that. She said there was this thunderstorm that came up that she said you never saw such wind and lightning and thunder in your life, and it just blew and poured down rain. So got on during the night, and they figured they better get on back home, you know.
And the
So
bridge was washed out.
He had a Model A Ford. He gets to Chappaco. They had an old wooden bridge. The storm had washed the bridge out. So they couldn't get that way. They had to go up to Red House Farm
And go
to go
across.
across the field to my grandmother's house. And he got halfway across the field, of course, and got the Model A Ford stuck in the
Stuck up
field.
to the axles in the mud.
Mom said she had to walk through Granddaddy's wheat that was up to her chest, pouring down, you know, owls flying overhead, the whole bed. She was scared to death. She said, I got back to the house, I was so damn mad I could have chewed nails. She said, but as mad as I wasn't nowhere near as mad as my dad was the next morning when he had to hook his horses up, go out in that field and pull that car out of there. It was hot.
Yeah, this here story is actually a combination of a couple of stories. One is, it's the story of George Hayden, who grew up at Red House Farm in Chappaco. The British burned that building in the War of 1812 when they invaded Chappaco, and the only thing left is the kitchen. And the walls in that kitchen are 3 feet thick. The windows go way down to the floor and way up to the ceiling. Floorboards are big as bushel baskets upstairs. And 20 years after the War of 1812, Hezekiah Garner Hayden and his family rebuilt what is currently Red House Farm. Now, I had to laugh because Wes Lyon said one time that when he was born, his grandmother wanted his mother to name him Hezekiah Garner Hayden Lyons, and she said she would drown him first. He said, can you imagine something like me walking around here and you calling him Hezekiah? But George Hayden grew up in that house, in Red House Farm, and fought at the Battle of Gettysburg and was wounded at the Battle of Gettysburg. And his mother got the local doctor, who was Willie T. Reeves, and they went in a buckboard all the way from Chappaco to Gettysburg battlefield. And he had died when they got there, and they brought his body home for burial. He's buried in Christ Church Cemetery there. And so this story is kind of his story, but it's also, to make the song, I put him on the Isle of Blackistone, which Wade Blackistone, I knew all these old St. Mary's County folks, they're all gone now, a lot of them. Wade, his great-grandfather kept a diary during the Civil War and often recorded in there, hearing the thunder over in Fredericksburg and Chancellorsville when they had the battles in Bull Run. You could hear them all the way. He said, and they called it Blackistone Island for 200 years. Why they want to go back to St. Clements? You know, he was a Blackistone. He was one of the families that came over in the Ark and the Dove. But so this is the story. It's called My Journey Will Be Over. When this old war is over, men don't go marching in the battle anymore. I'm gonna sit at home in Maryland, watch the sun set over on that old Virginia shore, and my journey will be over. He was born a country boy on the Isle of Blackistone, grew to manhood, loving all the things he'd grown to know. Cavaliers and ladies and the lords of Baltimore. of the banner they held high and all that it stood for. Oh, when this old war is over, we'll sit out on the river bank and watch the clouds roll freely, and the Battle of Antietam, the bloody loss at Gettysburg will be but memory, and my journey will be over. Now upon a battlefield a wounded soldier lies, fighting back with all his might the tears that fill his eyes. And he thinks about a girl he loved and the home he left behind. Don't leave me here, please take me back to Maryland when I die. Oh, when this old war is over, men don't go marching in the battle anymore. I'm gonna sit at home in Maryland, watch the sun set over on that old Virginia shore, and my journey will be over. My journey will be over. My journey will be over. Thank you very much.
I got a song that, it's been 25 years ago since John Denver passed away. Just
And he reminds you to make sure to always have plenty of fuel in your airplane.
well, this would have been a song that I would definitely have pitched him this song if he had lived. This is a painting of my grandmother's place that I had a little photograph I'd taken of it, and Miss Bernadette here painted this for me off the photograph, and she did a wonderful job. It's a sepia picture, and it's my grandmother's house that was built by her first husband, Bob Lacey, in 1854. The kitchen part of it was added on much later, but strange story my mother told me. Bob Lacey was married to a nice young lady, and they had a friend in common who was my grandmother, who was living up that little house by Dinard School up on the little knoll up there. It used to be yellow. Sears and Roebuck house, one of them ones they mail order and built. Well, that was where Grandmama grew up at, and they stopped by to see her one afternoon, and when they left, his wife got a really strange look on her face, and she said, "I'm going to die, and when I do, you're going to marry her." And he said, "What are you talking about?" She said, "No, that's what's going to happen. I'm going to pass away, and you're going to marry her." And that's exactly what happened. She died, and he ended up marrying my grandmother. Strange story, but a little precognitive stuff there. Well, I have a postcard that my grandfather, after Bob Lacey passed away, right around the turn of the century, I'd say about 1907, he sent her this postcard, which, by the way, was a souvenir from the St. Louis State Fair in 1904. No, he got it. But he wrote it to her. Talk about simple times. The address was Rose Lacey, Chapco, Maryland. I mean, that was it. Didn't even have a zip code on it. It was like 1 cent stamp. And it was real high tech, too. If you held it up to the light, the moon in the sky and the windows lit up on it. It was pretty high tech for those days. Well, so her house after Grandma passed away, you know, was rented out off and on. The farm was bought by Bradford Reeves, and it's set back off the road for a long time. And this is, I wrote this song about it. It's called "Time the Traveler," which he's quite prolific. He keeps on traveling on. Once upon a yesterday, just off down the lane, there's a place that used to be, now standing in the rain. An old house full of memories, all but forgotten now, where once a farmer walked behind his plow. Long years pass away down the old back road, where the honeysuckles tangled, the strangers never go. And time will tell its story just as time has always done. Time, the traveler, always moving on. All the things to leave behind, I left my farm and field. My life was another kind of concrete and steel. Tomorrow comes too quickly, and the past is just a dream, flowing down a never-ending stream. Long years pass away down the old back road, where the honeysuckles tangle, the strangers never go. And time will tell its story just as time has always done. Time, the traveler, always moving on. An old man named Winter shuffled down my street. His breath was cold as fury. There was frost on his feet. He settled in early and he stayed for a while. Come springtime he became a little child. Long years pass away down the old back road, where the honeysuckles tangled now and strangers never go. And time will tell its story just as time has always done. Time, the traveler, always moving on. Thank you. All right. Thank you very kindly. You know, being as it is October, we should play a ghostly little song. This is called "The Widow's Light." The widow's house once stood right by the road, widowed by the war, the story goes. And even though she prayed with all her might, Many lonely nights shone the widow's light. I will tell you that I love you till the day you are inside. I will leave for you alive. The old town settled down after the war. The crossroads bar just louder than before. On nights too dark to know which way was right, stragglers found their way by the widow's light. I will tell you that I love you till the day you are inside. I will leave for you alive. The old house that stood by the road is gone, and cars, not horses, pass and rumble on. And then there's those who drive by late at night, who now and then still see the widow's light. I will tell you that I love you till the day you are inside. I will leave for you alive. All right, here. Thank you. We'd like to remind you folks, we did bring some CDs tonight. If you're all interested in any of the songs that we've been playing, we have some. They're only like $10 a piece. They ain't going to break the bank. And we'd appreciate if you wanted to take a little of us home with you. We got some up here for you to do so with. Oh, yeah.
I think this is a real important song. When the first time I heard this song, I was like, wow. It says so much, and it really needs to be said in today's world, especially.
This is called the Land of Plenty. You got B flat.
Dave?
All right, let's do that. Let me take it up one more. If you don't C sharp, you'll B flat. You know that. That might not be B flat. Sounds right though. Sun comes up and the day begins in the land of plenty. In our cars we drive away again into the many. Always driven to be better than we are. A revelation how we may have gone too far as we look towards the future in the land of plenty. We build our cities and we stand in awe to watch them growing. Money talks and you know what walks but the runoff's overflowing. Already changing, there's some things that didn't last. Too late we realized we weren't just killing grass. As long as we're not killing hope in the land of plenty. Tomorrow is a place to be, but will there be a place for us within it? You think what surrounds us not worth saving? Think of your place in it. 'Cause it won't matter who is rich or who is poor. If we don't fix it, it won't matter anymore. When I see a homeless man, I think about the land of plenty. The land of plenty.
Thank you so much for listening. Appreciate it.
Thanks, folks. We appreciate it. I have one more story to tell and one more song. This is one of those forgotten stories in St. Mary's County.
What key is it in?
It's in the key of G, I do believe.
All right, that's good. I know that one.
The story of Ida Kirk over in Chaptico. She's buried in Christ Church Cemetery. She's got a stone angel on her grave that has been looking up skyward. And the story of Ida Kirk is quite amazing. She was a philanthropist.
She was
Mama
said she was the
sterling
silver.
sterling silver fortune. She was blessed with a fortune, and she did a lot of good with her money. She helped people, and she was known as the Angel of St. Mary's. But somebody didn't like her. In 1933, somebody wired 3 sticks of dynamite underneath her car and killed her.
In Chaptico, this happened.
In Chaptico, no less. I mean, 1934, they found a shotgun shell in her driveway where they had emptied out the gunpowder and laced the fuses of the dynamite to lay up on the manifold of the car, so when it heated up, it would ignite the fuse. And it was an unsolved murder. They never did find out who did it. But the place where she's buried there in Christ Church Cemetery in Chaptico is, she's got that stone angel over the top of her grave, and the shadow of those angels' wings have passed over her grave ever since she was buried there. And that's where I got the idea for this song. It's called The Shadow of Angel Wings. A bumblebee hovers, fumbles around, crowns of white clover on the old church ground. The eyes of the angel looking above, so unforgiving, unlucky in love. Oh, angel, in the shadow of angel wings. Oh, angel, in the shadow of angel wings. so long forgotten, so long unknown. You paid the price for all that you own. They buried the secret you haven't told yet. The road to your ending was paved with regrets. Oh, angel, in the shadow of angel wings. Oh, angel, in the shadow of angel wings. How many years has your angel looked up? Just a few tears in eternity's cup. The wind blows at night and the rain never tells, and no one remembers the angel that fell. Oh, angel, in the shadow of angel wings. Oh, angel, in the shadow of angel wings. A bumblebee hovers, fumbles around, crowns of white clover on the old church ground. Thank you all so much for listening to us tonight. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.